His mistress made her serve tea, until the Duke saw her burned wrist.
I had been pouring tea for 3 months when the Duke finally saw me. Not looked at me. Servants are invisible in houses like this. He had passed me in hallways, walked by as I cleaned fireplaces, stood near enough to touch while I served at dinner parties. He had never once registered my existence. But on that particular afternoon, everything changed. Lady Blackwood, his mistress, though the household never used that word, had decided to humiliate me in front of her guest, the Countess of Ashworth. She did this regularly. Small cruelties that reminded me of my place, that punished me for sins I did not understand, that satisfied something dark and hungry in her nature. Clarissa, pour the tea. And do try not to spill it this time. Your clumsiness is an embarrassment. I knelt beside the tea service, my worn apron brushing the expensive carpet, and began to pour. My hands were steady despite her words. 3 months of serving Lady Blackwood had taught me to suppress every reaction, every emotion, every sign of the person I had been before I came to this house. And then he walked in. The Duke of Ravenswood entered through the French doors from the garden, brushing leaves from his coat, clearly not expecting to find his mistress entertaining guests. He stopped just inside the room, his eyes sweeping over the scene. Lady Blackwood on her chaise, the Countess in her chair, me kneeling with the teapot. I should have kept my head down. I should have remained invisible. But the teapot was heavy, and my sleeve had ridden up. And he saw my wrist. The burn scars were old, 2 years old, to be precise. They circled my wrist like a bracelet of damaged flesh, the legacy of a night I tried not to remember. I had learned to keep them hidden, always wearing long sleeves, always careful, always conscious of the questions they might raise. But in that moment, kneeling on the floor with a heavy teapot, my sleeve had slipped. And the Duke of Ravenswood was staring at my wrist with an expression that stopped my heart. Horror. Recognition. Grief. The teapot slipped from my hands. Hot water splashed across the carpet, across Lady Blackwood's silk gown, across everything. She screamed. The Countess gasped. Servants came running. But the Duke never moved. He stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the burns that marked my skin, his face the color of ash. Where did you get those scars? His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I should have lied. I should have made up a story about a kitchen accident, about childhood clumsiness, about anything other than the truth. Instead, I looked into his eyes and saw something that made me tell the truth for the first time in 2 years. I saw my brother. If you want to know how I ended up serving tea to my own brother's mistress, stay with me. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this story only gets darker before it finds the light. My name is not Clarissa. My name is Lady Helena Ashworth, and I was supposed to have died 2 years ago. At least, that is what the world believed. That is what my brother Edmund, the Duke of Ravenswood, believed. That is what the newspapers had reported when the fire consumed our family's winter estate, killing my parents and, supposedly, myself. But I had not died. I had escaped through a window, my nightgown aflame, my skin burning as I rolled in the snow to extinguish the fire. I had stumbled through the darkness, delirious with pain, until I collapsed on the doorstep of a cottage belonging to a woman named Mrs. Finch. She saved my life. She nursed me through weeks of fever and infection, treated my burns with poultices and prayers, and asked no questions about who I was or where I had come from. When I finally recovered enough to speak, I discovered that 3 months had passed. My family was dead. My brother had inherited everything. And everyone believed that I had perished in the flames. I could have gone to Edmund immediately. I could have revealed my survival, reclaimed my identity, returned to the life I had known. But I did not. Because I knew something that the investigators did not. Something that the newspapers never reported. Something that had made me keep running even after my wounds healed. The fire had not been an accident. I had woken that night to the smell of smoke and the sound of voices. My room was on the 2nd floor of the winter estate, far from the main wing where my parents slept. I had risen from bed, opened my door, and seen flames already consuming the hallway. Escape through the house was impossible. But as I turned toward my window, I heard something that chilled me more than the smoke. Voices. In the garden below my room. 2 people, speaking in urgent whispers. Is it done? The fire is spreading. They will not escape. And the girl? Her room is directly above us. The flames will reach her soon. I had not waited to hear more. I had smashed my window, jumped to the roof of the garden shed below, and rolled into the snow that saved my life. I had run without looking back, without thinking, without understanding anything except that someone had murdered my parents and intended to murder me as well. For 2 years, I had hidden. I had taken the name Clarissa, found work as a servant, and moved from household to household, always watching, always listening, always searching for any clue about who had destroyed my family. And then I had seen the advertisement. Lady Blackwood of Ashworth House was seeking a parlour maid. The position came with room and board, reasonable wages, and the opportunity to serve in one of London's finest homes. Ashworth House. The London residence of the Duke of Ravenswood. My brother's home. I had applied immediately. Not because I wanted to reveal myself to Edmund, I still did not trust that he was uninvolved in our parents' deaths. But because I needed to get close. To watch. To learn who had ordered the fire and why. I had not expected to find my brother's mistress in residence. I had not expected her cruelty. And I had certainly not expected him to see my scars. If you are still with me, waiting to learn who burned down the house and why, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. This story is reaching people all over the world, and I want to say hello to every single one of you. The aftermath of the spilled tea was chaos. Lady Blackwood was screaming about her ruined gown. The Countess was attempting to calm her while simultaneously distancing herself from the disaster. Servants were rushing in with cloths and apologies and the frantic energy of people terrified of losing their positions. But the Duke ignored all of it. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grasped my arm, and pulled me to my feet. Where did you get those scars? I tried to pull away. Your Grace, please, I am sorry about the tea, it was an accident. I am not asking about the tea. His grip tightened. I am asking about your wrist. Those burns. Where did they come from? Lady Blackwood's voice cut through the room. Edmund, what on earth are you doing? Unhand that clumsy servant and help me with this dress. Leave us. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The authority in those 2 words silenced everyone in the room. Edmund. I said leave us. All of you. Now. The Countess practically fled. Lady Blackwood hesitated, her beautiful face twisting with something ugly, but even she could not defy the Duke's direct command. She swept from the room with what dignity she could muster, trailing wet silk and wounded pride. The servants followed, closing the doors behind them. We were alone. I will ask you one more time. His voice was quieter now, but no less intense. Where did you get those scars? I could lie. I could maintain my disguise. I could claim a kitchen accident, a childhood mishap, anything. But I had spent 2 years lying. 2 years hiding. 2 years pretending to be someone I was not. And my brother was standing before me, his eyes filled with grief, his hands trembling as they held my arm. Edmund. I said his name for the first time in 2 years. It is me. It is Helena. He did not believe me. Of course he did not believe me. His sister had died in a fire 2 years ago. Her body had been found in the ruins, burned beyond recognition but identified by the locket she always wore. He had buried her. He had mourned her. He had spent 2 years trying to rebuild his life around an absence that would never be filled. And now a servant girl was claiming to be her. This is impossible. He released my arm and stepped back. Helena died. I saw the body. I buried her myself. You buried someone. But it was not me. I pulled back my sleeve fully, exposing the full extent of the burn scars. I escaped through my window. My nightgown caught fire as I jumped. I rolled in the snow and ran. I nearly died, but a woman named Mrs. Finch found me and nursed me back to health. If this is some kind of scheme. When we were children, we had a hiding place in the garden. Behind the old oak tree, where the roots created a hollow large enough for 2. We called it the Secret Kingdom and made up elaborate stories about the creatures who lived there. You were king of the wolves, and I was queen of the ravens. He went very still. Anyone could have learned that. The servants. The night before the fire, you came to my room to apologize. We had quarreled at dinner, I do not even remember what about, and you felt guilty. You brought me a book you had found in the village, a collection of ghost stories because you knew I loved them. You inscribed the front page with the words to my favorite ghost, who has haunted me since birth. Helena. His voice cracked on the name. I did not die, Edmund. I have been alive this entire time. Hiding, because I knew the fire was not an accident. What are you talking about? I heard them. The night of the fire. 2 people in the garden below my window. They were talking about ensuring no one escaped. They were talking about me specifically. About making sure the flames reached my room. I held his gaze. Someone murdered our parents. Someone tried to murder me. And I have spent 2 years trying to discover who. The hours that followed were the most painful and the most healing of my life. Edmund sent Lady Blackwood away, permanently, as I later learned, and closed himself in his study with me. We talked through the night, comparing memories, verifying details, slowly convincing him that I was truly his sister returned from the dead. By dawn, he was weeping openly. I should have known. I should have felt that you were still alive. What kind of brother fails to recognize his own sister? A brother who was told his sister was dead and had no reason to doubt it. I took his hand. I chose to hide, Edmund. I chose not to come to you. That was my decision, not your failure. Why? Why did you hide? Why did you not come to me immediately? Because I did not know who I could trust. I hesitated, knowing my next words would wound him. Including you. He pulled back as though I had struck him. You thought I was involved. I did not know what to think. Our parents' deaths made you duke, gave you control of everything. The fire happened the very night before father was to announce a new will that would have altered the inheritance. I did not want to believe you capable of such a thing, but I could not risk being wrong. A new will? What are you talking about? Father told me that evening. He was planning to settle a substantial portion of the estate directly on me, independent of any future husband. He said he had concerns about certain people close to our family, people who might try to control our fortune through marriage or manipulation. I searched his face. You truly did not know? I knew nothing about any new will. The solicitors never mentioned it. The documents we found after the fire showed no indication. Then the documents were destroyed. Or hidden. I leaned forward. Edmund, think. Who knew about father's plans? Who would have benefited from preventing that new will from being executed? He was silent for a long moment. And then his expression changed. Blackwood, he whispered. Lady Blackwood's brother. He handled father's legal affairs. He would have known everything. Now we are getting to the truth. If you want to see this villain exposed, comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single comment. The investigation that followed revealed a conspiracy more extensive than either of us had imagined. Lord Albert Blackwood, Lady Blackwood's brother, had been my father's solicitor for nearly a decade. He had managed the family's legal affairs, reviewed contracts and wills, and had access to every private document the Ashworth family possessed. He had also been systematically embezzling from the estate for years. Edmund discovered this when he began reviewing the accounts with fresh eyes. Discrepancies that had been dismissed as clerical errors revealed themselves as deliberate theft. Investments that had supposedly failed had never existed at all. Money that should have been accumulating in trust had vanished into accounts controlled by Blackwood. He was bleeding us dry, Edmund said, his voice hollow with betrayal. And when father discovered it, when father decided to take action. He decided to take more permanent measures, I finished. The new will my father had planned would have included an independent audit of all family accounts. It would have exposed everything Blackwood had stolen. His only option was to prevent that will from being executed. And the fire had done exactly that. But there was more to the conspiracy than simple embezzlement. Lady Blackwood, Victoria, as I had learned her name, had been part of her brother's scheme from the beginning. She had positioned herself as Edmund's mistress specifically to maintain access to the family. She reported everything Edmund said and did to her brother. She had suggested the household where I would be placed when I answered the advertisement, keeping me close while ensuring I remained invisible. She had known who I was from the moment I walked through the door. She played me for a fool, Edmund said, pacing his study with barely contained fury. She pretended to care for me while reporting to her brother and watching Helena serve tea like a common maid. She did more than watch. I showed him my wrist again. Not the burn scars from the fire, but newer marks. The burns from the fire are here. But these, I indicated fresher scars, less healed. These are from her. She burned me deliberately, claiming I had been careless with a candle. It was punishment for nearly being recognized by one of the dinner guests. Edmund's face went white with rage. I will destroy them. Both of them. They will not escape justice. Justice requires evidence. We have suspicions, but we need proof that will stand in a court of law. Then we will find proof. Finding proof required patience and cunning. Lord Blackwood was careful. Years of embezzlement had taught him to cover his tracks meticulously. The evidence of his theft was circumstantial at best, ledgers that could be explained as accounting errors, missing funds that might have been lost to legitimate bad investments. We needed a confession. Or we needed documentation that could not be explained away. The plan we developed was dangerous. It required me to resume my role as Clarissa the servant, to return to the household where Lady Blackwood still believed her scheme was undiscovered. It required Edmund to pretend that nothing had changed, that he remained ignorant of his mistress's betrayal. It required both of us to walk directly into the lair of the people who had murdered our parents and tried to murder me. I do not like this, Edmund said, on the night before I was to return to my servants' quarters. There must be another way. There is not. Lady Blackwood trusts that I am thoroughly cowed. Her brother believes you remain blind to his theft. They feel safe, and safe people make mistakes. I touched his arm. I have survived 2 years hiding in plain sight. I can survive a few more weeks. And if something goes wrong, then you will come for me. Just as you would have come for me 2 years ago, if you had known I was alive. He pulled me into an embrace, the first embrace I had received from family in 2 years. I am not losing you again, Helena. I swear it on our parents' graves. Then do not fail. Because I intend to watch these monsters hang for what they did. The weeks that followed were the most nerve-wracking of my life. I returned to my duties as Clarissa, pouring tea and cleaning rooms and enduring Lady Blackwood's casual cruelties with the same practiced submission I had shown for months. But now I watched with different eyes. I listened with different ears. I gathered every scrap of information that might help us build our case. Lady Blackwood met frequently with her brother, usually in the small sitting room off the main drawing room. They believed the walls were thick enough to prevent eavesdropping. They were wrong. I discovered a servant's passage that ran behind the sitting room wall, a passage that had been designed to allow staff to move unseen between floors. Through a crack in the paneling, I could hear their conversations clearly. And what I heard confirmed everything we had suspected. Edmund is becoming suspicious about the accounts, Lady Blackwood said, one evening when she thought herself secure. He has been asking questions that make me nervous. Let him ask. The records have been altered so thoroughly that even the most diligent auditor would find nothing. Lord Blackwood's voice was smug with confidence. By the time anyone thinks to look closely, we will have extracted everything of value and moved it beyond reach. And if he discovers the truth about the fire, he will not. Everyone believes it was an accident. The girl is dead, and with her died the only witness who could have contradicted our story. The girl is not dead, Albert. She is pouring tea in the next room. Silence. What did you say? I recognized her months ago. The new maid, Clarissa. She is Helena Ashworth. She survived the fire and has been hiding as a servant ever since. Why did you not tell me immediately? Because I wanted to be certain. And because having her here, under my control, seemed more useful than having her dead somewhere I could not watch. Lady Blackwood laughed. She has no idea I know who she is. She thinks herself so clever, hiding in plain sight. But she has been under my thumb the entire time. This changes nothing. We will simply arrange another accident. A servant falling down the stairs. A tragic mishap with a carriage. These things happen. Make it soon. Edmund has been looking at me strangely since that incident with the tea. I think he may have seen her scars. I had heard enough. I slipped away from my listening post and went directly to Edmund, my heart pounding with fury and fear. They knew who I was. They were planning to kill me again. And this time, they would not fail. Edmund acted immediately. He had been building relationships with magistrates and investigators for weeks, quietly laying the groundwork for prosecution. When I brought him this new evidence, testimony I could provide about what I had overheard, he moved with a speed and decisiveness that reminded me of our father. Lord Albert Blackwood was arrested at his office the following morning, caught in the middle of transferring funds to an account in a foreign bank. The documents seized from his premises included detailed records of his embezzlement, correspondence with his sister about their plans, and most damning of all, a letter written on the night of the fire, discussing how to ensure that the girl did not escape the flames. Lady Victoria Blackwood was arrested that same afternoon, at Ashworth House, in the very drawing room where she had made me serve her tea. I was there when they took her away. I was no longer wearing my servant's apron. I was dressed in a gown befitting Lady Helena Ashworth, my hair arranged properly, my bearing that of the noblewoman I had always been. Victoria's face when she saw me, when she understood that her supposedly ignorant victim had been gathering evidence against her the entire time, was a satisfaction I will remember for the rest of my life. "You," she hissed, as the constables took her arms. "You conniving little." "Careful, Lady Blackwood. Whatever you say may be reported in court." I smiled. "I do hope you enjoyed making me serve your tea. Because the next cups you receive will be in prison." She screamed curses at me as they dragged her away. I did not flinch. 0. The trial was the sensation of the season. All of London gathered to hear the story of Lady Helena Ashworth, the young noblewoman who had survived an assassination attempt, hidden as a servant in her brother's own household, and single-handedly gathered the evidence that would bring her parents' murderers to justice. The newspapers called me brave. They called me cunning. They called me a heroine of the First Order. I called myself a survivor. The Blackwoods were convicted on all charges. Lord Albert was sentenced to hang for his role in the murders. Lady Victoria received life imprisonment, her beauty and her schemes meaning nothing in the face of incontrovertible evidence. Justice, at long last, was served. But the story did not end there. In the weeks following the trial, I began the slow process of reclaiming my life. I moved back into the family home, taking up the position I should have inherited years earlier. I worked alongside Edmund to repair the damage the Blackwoods had done to our estate. I began receiving visitors, attending social functions, and remembering what it felt like to be seen as a person rather than a servant. And I met Lord Julian Harrington. He was different from the men I had encountered during my years in hiding. He was kind, genuine, interested in who I was rather than what I represented. He asked questions about my experience as a servant, listened without judgment, and admitted that my courage impressed him more than any title ever could. "You survived something impossible," he said, one evening in Edmund's garden. "Most people would have crumbled. You fought back." I did not feel brave at the time. I felt terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. He took my hand. "I would very much like to get to know the woman who faced down murderers and brought them to justice. If you would permit me." I looked at this man with his honest eyes and his gentle smile. "I would like that too." We were married in the spring, in the same church where my parents had been married 30 years earlier. Edmund gave me away, his eyes bright with tears but his smile genuine. The pews were filled with friends and family. People who had mourned my death and rejoiced at my resurrection, people who had supported us through the trial and the aftermath, people who represented the future rather than the painful past. Julian stood at the altar, waiting for me, his expression one of such profound happiness that I felt my own heart overflow. "You look beautiful," he whispered, as I reached his side. "I feel alive. Truly alive, for the first time in years. Then let us begin our life together." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. The reception was joyful. And that night, as Julian and I stood on the balcony of our new home, watching the stars emerge in the London sky, I finally allowed myself to release the burden I had carried for so long. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked. "I am thinking about tea." He laughed. An unexpected topic for a wedding night. I spent 3 months pouring tea for the woman who had orchestrated my parents' murder. I served her with trembling hands, watched her cruelty, endured her burns. I turned to face him. And now I am standing here, free and loved and finally home. The journey between those two places seems almost unbelievable. It is remarkable. You are remarkable. I am Helena. Just Helena. That is all I ever wanted to be. He pulled me close, and I leaned into his warmth, into the safety of his arms, into the future we would build together. I had been made to serve tea to my brother's mistress. The Duke had seen my burned wrist. And from that moment of recognition had come everything: reunion, investigation, justice, and finally, love. That is my story. If it touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible. Comment where you are watching from. I want to say hello to every single person who stayed until the end. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next. Thank you for being here.